What would you do if someone showed up at your door, clipboard in hand, demanding to inspect your home as if they owned the place? I had only been living in my new house for a few months, and already, I was starting to wonder if I had made a mistake. When I first moved in, I was thrilled. Finally, I had space to call my own, no more cramped apartment, no more noisy neighbors stomping around at all hours. It wasn't the most luxurious place, but it felt like home from the moment I stepped inside. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, just what I had wanted. But there was one thing I hadn't thought much about at the time: the Homeowners Association. I wasn't part of the HOA, and I had no plans to be. I had done my research, checked the paperwork, and confirmed that my house wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. So, as far as I was concerned, their rules and regulations didn't apply to me. But that didn't seem to matter to Marge. I had heard whispers about her before I even moved in. Marge, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood. The type of person who made it her life's mission to enforce rules that no one else cared about. I had neighbors warn me about her, stories of petty violations, ridiculous fines, and relentless harassment over the smallest things. I figured if I just kept to myself and minded my own business, I'd be fine. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. I spent my free time working on my yard, cleaning up the neglected garden left by the previous owner, and fixing little things around the house. Nothing major, just small improvements to make the place feel like mine. Then, one afternoon, while I was outside watering my plants, I heard the sharp, deliberate knock on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over, hesitating for just a second before opening the door. And there she was, Marge, standing on my porch, clipboard in hand, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hello," she chirped in a tone that was just a little too cheerful. "I'm Marge, the president of the HOA, and I'm here for a quick inspection of your property." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She didn't even hesitate. "Yes. I just need to check your garden, your fence, and a few other things to make sure everything is up to code." She shifted slightly, glancing toward my backyard as if she were already planning her little inspection. "It's part of the HOA rules, you know." I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. "I'm not part of the HOA, I said, keeping my voice even. "I didn't sign up for that." Marge's smile didn't falter, but I could see the slight narrowing of her eyes. "Well, you should be," she said, as if that settled the matter. "But that doesn't really matter right now. All homes in this neighborhood are expected to maintain community standards, and I have the right to inspect any property to ensure compliance." My stomach tightened. The audacity of this woman. "No, Marge," I said, my patience already wearing thin. "You don't. This is my property, and I'm asking you to leave." Her face turned a shade redder, and for the first time, the fake pleasantness cracked. "You can't just refuse an inspection," she snapped. "This isn't some free-for-all where you can do whatever you want. There are rules, and you need to comply." I crossed my arms. "I don't have to do anything. And you don't have the authority to come onto my property without my permission." Marge clicked her pen against her clipboard, clearly frustrated. Then she muttered under her breath, "We'll see about that." She turned on her heel and marched off, her heels clicking against the pavement as she disappeared down the sidewalk. I watched her go, a feeling of unease settling in my chest. I knew she wouldn't just let this go. But I didn't expect her to go as far as she did. The next morning, I stepped outside to grab the mail and immediately noticed something out of place. Taped to my front door was a bright yellow violation notice, its bold red lettering practically screaming at me. My first instinct was to roll my eyes. I already knew who was behind this. I ripped it off the door and scanned the contents. Sure enough, it was from the HOA. Or, more accurately, from Marge. According to the notice, my garden was non-compliant, my fence was improperly placed, and the plants I had installed were too large for community standards. The letter outlined a list of infractions so absurd I actually laughed out loud. There was even a section detailing the potential fines for non-compliance, totaling over $1,500. Unbelievable. I didn't waste any time. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture of the notice, and forwarded it to Dan, my lawyer. He called me back almost immediately, his voice laced with irritation. "This is just a scare tactic," he assured me. "She has no legal authority over your property. Ignore the fines. If she tries anything else, we'll take action." That should have been the end of it. But Marge wasn't done. Over the next few days, I began noticing her more and more. It wasn't just the occasional drive-by anymore. She would slow her car in front of my house, eyes locked onto my property as if she were searching for something else to complain about. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was just passing by. Maybe it was all in my head. But then, one afternoon, I caught her in the act. I had just stepped outside to water my plants when I spotted her parked across the street, phone in hand, taking pictures of my yard. She wasn't even trying to be discreet. She sat there, angling her phone as if she were gathering evidence for some ridiculous new violation. My blood boiled. I waved at her, making it clear that I saw her, expecting her to at least have the decency to acknowledge she'd been caught. Instead, she quickly turned her head, dropped her phone into her lap, and sped off. That was it. I had put up with her nonsense long enough. I dialed Dan again and explained what had just happened. He let out a frustrated sigh and told me, "This is turning into harassment. It's time to start documenting everything." I took his advice and ordered security cameras that same day. It wasn't an expensive setup, just a few cameras to cover my yard, driveway, and front door. If Marge wanted to play games, I was going to make sure I had the upper hand. But she wasn't done yet. A few days later, another letter arrived, this time demanding I attend an official HOA meeting to discuss my ongoing violations. The wording was even more aggressive than before, threatening legal action if I refused to show up. I had ignored her long enough. I wasn't about to let her bully me into following rules that didn't apply to me. Instead of tossing the letter aside, I sat down and wrote a response. I made it crystal clear. I was not a member of the HOA and had no legal obligation to follow its rules. Marge's repeated attempts to enforce regulations on my property were harassment. If this continued, would be taking legal action. I included copies of every violation notice she had sent me, photos of her parked outside my home, and a detailed timeline of every incident. If she wanted to play hardball, I was going to make sure she knew I wasn't backing down. For the first time since this nightmare started, I actually felt a sense of relief. Maybe now, Marge would realize she had pushed too far. For a few days, everything was quiet. No new notices. No drive-bys. No staged photos. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had finally given up. Then, one morning, I stepped outside and felt my stomach drop. My backyard gate was wide open. The lock, cut clean through. A chill ran down my spine as I scanned my yard, my pulse hammering in my ears. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. But someone had been here. And I already knew who it was. I stood frozen, staring at the open gate, my mind racing. The lock had been cut clean through, the jagged edges gleaming in the morning light. Someone had been on my property, someone who wanted me to know it, a cold sense of unease crept over me as I stepped forward, cautiously scanning my yard. Nothing seemed out of place. No stolen tools, no vandalism, no footprints in the soil, just the gate, left wide open, as if to send a message. I knew exactly who was behind it. Without wasting a second, I grabbed my phone and called Dan. He answered on the second ring, his tone sharp and businesslike. They cut the lock, he repeated, his voice darkening. This just went from harassment to criminal trespassing. I relayed everything, how I had checked the yard, how nothing seemed disturbed, how the gate had been deliberately left open. He told me to file a police report immediately. I agreed. This wasn't some petty HOA dispute anymore, this was a clear violation of my privacy and security. The officer who arrived was professional but cautious. He took my statement, examined the cut lock, and reviewed the footage from my newly installed security cameras. Unfortunately, the camera hadn't caught the trespasser. The angle covered the driveway and front porch, but not the side of the house where the gate was. Still, the officer agreed that this wasn't random, it's targeted, he admitted. You should definitely be careful. I took his advice to heart. That same day, I upgraded my security system, adding motion-activated floodlights and another camera facing the backyard. If Marge, or whoever she sent, tried this again, I'd catch them. But then, just when I thought she couldn't sink any lower, Marge did the unthinkable. A few days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Confused, I opened it, my eyes scanning the dense legal jargon. Then I saw it, a contract with my signature at the bottom. My signature. Only, I had never signed it. My heart pounded as I flipped through the pages. According to this fraudulent contract, I had voluntarily agreed to join the HOA and accept all of its rules, fines, and authority. There was even a payment schedule for membership dues. It was official looking, covered in legal jargon, and designed to intimidate. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Marge had forged my name. I felt a slow burn of fury build inside me. This wasn't just harassment anymore, this was fraud. I grabbed my phone and called Dan again, barely able to keep my voice steady as I explained what I was holding in my hands. Silence. Then a low, angry exhale. This is illegal, she's committing fraud, plain and simple, he said. We're not just sending a response this time, we're taking legal action. His next instructions were clear. I needed to get a handwriting expert to verify that the signature was forged, document everything, and prepare to press charges. He also told me to say nothing to Marge directly. Instead, we'd hit her where it hurt, *** in court, ***. But Marge wasn't finished yet. The next morning, I woke up to another violation notice, this time plastered on my garage door. Only now, the fines weren't just hundreds of dollars, they totaled over $10,000. According to the notice, I owed the HOA for unauthorized landscaping, aka, my garden. Non-compliant fencing. Failure to pay HOA dues, which I had never agreed to. Disrupting neighborhood harmony. It got worse. Attached to the notice was a formal petition filed by the HOA, seeking to place a lien on my house for unpaid dues and fines. Marge was trying to take my home. That was it. I had tolerated her games, ignored her petty power moves, and tried to handle things rationally. But this? This was war. I met with Dan that afternoon, handing over every piece of evidence we had. She's overplayed her hand, he told me, his expression deadly serious. Now we take her down. We immediately filed a formal legal complaint against Marge and the HOA for fraud, harassment, and illegal attempts to collect debt. At Dan's recommendation, I also reached out to local news reporters who had covered corrupt HOAs before. If Marge wanted to play dirty, I was about to drag her and her little kingdom into the spotlight. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, she pulled one more stunt that made my blood run cold. That night, my security cameras shut off. Completely. I checked my phone, trying to access the feed, but every camera had gone dark. And then, the next morning, I received a call from the HOA. Not a letter. A call. The voice on the other end was chillingly smug. We need to discuss the damage you caused to HOA property last night. I frowned, gripping my phone. What the hell are you talking about? A dramatic sigh. You were caught on camera vandalizing community decorations and threatening an HOA member. I felt a slow, creeping dread settle in my chest. This was a setup. Marge is already preparing to press charges, the voice continued. We strongly suggest you cooperate. My jaw clenched as I barely managed to hold my temper. Oh, I'll cooperate, I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning inside me. I'll cooperate when I sue every last one of you. I hung up and immediately called Dan. Marge had officially crossed the line. And I was about to make sure she regretted every second of it. I paced across my living room, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. This was beyond anything I had imagined. Marge had shut down my security system, fabricated evidence, and was now accusing me of crimes I didn't commit. This wasn't just HOA harassment anymore, this was a full-blown attack. Dan's voice was sharp and steady when he finally answered my call. They're framing you, he said immediately. I guarantee that footage is either doctored or staged. They're trying to corner you into submission. I exhaled through gritted teeth. They're not just trying. They've already filed a complaint. I just got the call. They're threatening to press charges if I don't cooperate. Dan didn't even hesitate. You are not speaking to them again. No calls. No responses. We handle this through legal channels now. I wanted to believe that was the smart move, but the thought of Marge and her goons manipulating security footage and spreading lies about me made my blood boil. This was a woman who had already committed fraud by forging my signature, cut through my backyard lock twice, and tried to steal my home with fake fines. Now, she was fabricating criminal accusations? I had to fight back. That night, I stayed up going through every security camera backup I had. The footage from the night before? Gone. Completely wiped. My cameras had shut off exactly 30 minutes before the so-called vandalism took place. Convenient. I started making calls. First, to my neighbors. Most of them ignored me, probably under Marge's thumb. But one of them, Lisa, who lived 3 houses down, hesitated. Then, in a hushed voice, she admitted, Marge told us we had to sign complaints against you, or she'd raise our HOA fees. My grip on the phone tightened. So that was her game. She wasn't just harassing me, she was blackmailing the entire neighborhood into turning against me. I needed proof. Lisa, would you be willing to make a statement about this? A long pause. I don't know. I have kids. If she finds out, she'll make my life hell. I understood. I didn't push her. But I recorded the conversation. If I couldn't get her on record officially, at least I had evidence that Marge was coercing people. The next morning, I found 2 more HOA violation notices tacked onto my door. This time, they accused me of running an unregistered business out of my home. What business? According to the paperwork, I was operating a construction company without a permit, because I had installed a garden and put up a fence. It was laughable. It was desperate. And it was illegal. Dan was already working on filing a lawsuit for defamation, fraud, and harassment, but I could tell he was just as pissed as I was. She's throwing everything she has at you, he said. She wants you to break. She wants you to give in. She had underestimated me. I had dealt with bad landlords before. Overbearing bosses. People who thought they could push me around. But Marge was something else entirely. She was a woman who had spent years controlling this neighborhood, and she wasn't about to let someone like me get in the way of her power trip. But she made one mistake. That night, at exactly 11:45 p.m., my security camera, now properly secured with offline backups, caught a car pulling up to my driveway. It was Marge. She sat in her car for nearly 20 minutes, watching my house. Then, just before she left, she pulled out her phone and took pictures of my front yard. I had no idea what she was planning, but I knew this was my chance. I made copies of the footage, sent everything to Dan. And by the next morning, we had a new strategy. We were taking Marge down publicly. Dan had already been in touch with a local journalist who covered HOA corruption. And when they saw the evidence, the fraud, the fake fines, the blackmail, the attempted framing, they agreed. This was going to be a headline story. But before I had the chance to see the fallout, something else happened. Something that finally pushed this into outright insanity. Because the next morning, when I stepped outside, my backyard gate was open again. And this time, I had caught her red-handed. The moment I saw the open gate, I knew this was it. The final straw. My security camera had captured everything this time, clear footage of Marge herself, creeping onto my property in the dead of night. There was no way she could talk her way out of this one. She had already tried fraud, harassment, blackmail, and even falsifying evidence against me, but this? This was criminal trespassing. I wasted no time. I called the police, filed another report, and turned over the footage. The officer who arrived didn't seem surprised. If anything, he looked tired, like this wasn't the first complaint he had taken about her. "We've had other calls about her before," he admitted. "But this? This is solid evidence. She's going to have a real problem explaining this in court." Dan wasted no time either. By the next morning, he had already sent an official cease and desist letter, filed a lawsuit against both Marge and the HOA, and forwarded all our evidence, including the forged contract, the fake violation fines, and the video footage, to the local news outlet that had agreed to cover the story. And once the story broke, it was over for Marge. The neighborhood, once terrified of her, turned against her completely. Other homeowners started coming forward with their own horror stories, unfair fines, threats, intimidation tactics, even stolen HOA funds. With all the pressure mounting, the HOA board had no choice but to remove her as president. But that wasn't the worst of it. Marge was charged with trespassing, harassment, and fraud. The lawsuit I filed added financial pressure she couldn't escape. Between the legal fees and mounting complaints, she was forced to sell her home and leave the neighborhood she had ruled over for years. The HOA itself crumbled under the weight of lawsuits and was ultimately dissolved. No more arbitrary rules. No more fines. Marge had lost everything. And me? I finally got the peace and quiet I had been fighting for all along. Looking back, I still can't believe how far she was willing to go just to control someone who wasn't even part of her HOA. And the worst part? She's not the only one. There are Marges everywhere, power-hungry, self-important, desperate for control over people who never asked for their interference. So now, I have to ask, have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare or a Karen who just wouldn't back down? Share your story below, let's see who had it worse.